Welcome the anointed ones. They laughed at Noah until it started raining. And chosen one, guess what? It's pouring now. Not just drizzles of truth, storms of everything you warned them about. And while they mocked your spiritual radar, rolled their eyes at your discernment, and whispered behind closed doors about your overthinking, now they're watching their lives unravel like you wrote the script. Here's the twist. According to behavioral psychology, communities often demonize the person who tells the truth before the group is ready to accept it. Not because you're wrong, but because you're a threat to the lie that keeps them comfortable. Translation? They're not mad at you. They're terrified of how right you've been. And let's be honest, some of them are so scared they're out here trying to Google how to spiritually reverse a prophecy, like it's a parking ticket. But this ain't fiction. This is divine recall. Karma with a clipboard. And you, dear chosen one, are the walking subpoena they didn't see coming. They're trying to act like they're not sweating, but even the church fans ain't working anymore. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into why the whole community is Lowkey scared now, how your words are echoing louder than their denial, and why your presence is now the most uncomfortable truth in the room. Let's talk about it. Number 1. They never expected the crazy one to be the prophet. They never expected the one they called crazy, dramatic, or unstable to be the one who had it right all along. That's what's messing them up the most right now. You weren't the loudest, you weren't the most polished, you didn't have the biggest following or the fanciest words, but what you had was truth, and you spoke it when it was inconvenient, when it was unpopular, and when no one was ready to hear it. They thought you were just ranting, they thought you were bitter, but you were ahead of them. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally, you were seeing things from a level they couldn't comprehend, and instead of humbling themselves, they mocked you. Now everything you warned them about is happening. The cracks are showing, the masks are slipping, the people you tried to protect them from, exposed, the cycles you told them to break, collapsing, and the same people who rolled their eyes at you are now quietly revisiting your words in their heads like a prophecy checklist. What makes this whole thing even more uncomfortable is that they were united in misunderstanding you. It wasn't just one or two people, it was the entire system. Family, friends, church folks, co-workers. They were all nodding together like they knew what they were talking about. But deep down, some of them weren't even sure you were wrong. They just didn't want to be the odd one out who stood with you. What's got them really scared now isn't just that you were right. It's that you were right when they were absolutely certain you were wrong. That's a hard pill to swallow. It means their judgment was off. Their instincts failed. Their leaders misled them. And your truth didn't come from a textbook or a degree. It came from the dirt, the trauma, the spiritual grind they thought would break you. But you didn't break. You transformed. And now your existence is a reminder that maybe, just maybe, the one they tried to silence was the one sent to warn them. Number 2, your presence exposed a collective delusion. You didn't just upset people, you disrupted an entire illusion, and that's what has them uncomfortable every time you walk into a room. You weren't just telling the truth about situations or certain people. You were cracking the foundation of what they believed about themselves, their community, their values. You didn't expose one person, you exposed a system, a mindset, a whole collective delusion they were all quietly agreeing to keep alive. And the second you stopped playing along, they knew the game was up. You weren't loud for attention, you were loud because you could see what they were pretending not to. You saw the power dynamics. You saw the lies passed down as tradition. You saw the abuse hiding behind respect, and you didn't flinch. That's what made you dangerous. That's why they labeled you the problem. Not because you caused chaos, but because you refused to keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. You chose truth over comfort, and they couldn't handle the consequences of that. Now they're sitting in the aftermath, watching all the things they said you were exaggerating play out in front of them. The family secrets are leaking. The religious manipulation is being called out. The fake peace they built on silence is falling apart. And suddenly, the crazy one makes more sense than the normal ones. That's a terrifying shift for people who relied on groupthink to feel secure. You proved that one soul rooted in truth is more powerful than an entire crowd built on denial. What really scares them now is that your clarity is exposing their blindness. Your strength is exposing their cowardice. Your healing is exposing how much they stayed stuck. And it's not just uncomfortable, it's a full-blown identity crisis. Because if you were right, then everything they believed, defended, and stood for might have been wrong. And that realization, that's the earthquake shaking their entire community. Number 3. Your accuracy feels like a supernatural audit. You didn't just speak the truth, you called things out before they happened. That's what's freaking them out. You weren't guessing, you weren't throwing out random opinions. You spoke with a confidence that only comes from being deeply in tune with something higher. And now that everything you said is starting to unfold exactly the way you described, they're not just shocked, they're spooked, because it feels like more than just being right. It feels supernatural. It feels like you are tapping into something they can't explain or control. People are starting to feel like your words were a kind of spiritual audit, like God was using your voice as a warning bell, and they ignored it. They brushed you off like you were just being dramatic or too intense. But now, they're connecting the dots. Every conversation, every confrontation, every moment they thought you were too much is starting to replay in their minds. And it's hitting different. Because it didn't come from a place of hate, it came from a place of knowing. Now they're paranoid, not because you're around, but because your presence reminds them they can't hide from the truth anymore. They feel watched, exposed, and spiritually uncomfortable. They know something bigger was moving through you, and it's forcing them to question what they really believe. It's one thing to argue with a person. It's another thing to feel like you were arguing with a divine message, and now you're seeing the consequences. They're scared not because you're perfect, but because you were chosen to see it before they did, chosen to speak what they didn't want to face, chosen to bring accountability when they were banking on silence. You being right isn't just a victory for you, it's a sign that judgment isn't coming later. It's already started, and it's knocking on their front door with receipts. Number 4. You have a history. They can't recreate, and that haunts them. They can copy your words, mimic your style, even steal your phrases. But they can't recreate the process that shaped you. They weren't there in the nights you cried out with no one to answer. They didn't go through the betrayal, the loneliness, the stripping away of everything that once gave you a sense of identity. You didn't get your insight from books or seminars. You got it from surviving what most people wouldn't have made it through with their sanity intact. That's what separates you. That's what makes your presence feel threatening even when you say nothing. They can laugh at how you speak. They can judge how intense you come across. But deep down, they know you're not speaking from theory. You're speaking from fire-tested experience. And that's something no degree, no platform, no crowd can fabricate. Your wisdom didn't come cheap. It came at the cost of blood, isolation, humiliation, and rebirth. That's why it hits different. That's why they pause when you talk, even if they pretend they're not listening. What really haunts them is the realization that they can't access the level of insight you have without being broken first. And that's the one thing they're not willing to go through. They want your depth without your darkness. They want your light without your scars. But God didn't just give you revelation. He dug it out of you through trials they were spared from. And now your life makes them uncomfortable because it reflects something they didn't have the courage to endure. They wish your gift came from something more acceptable, something they could explain away or earn. But it didn't. It came from the pit, from the wilderness, from being misunderstood and misjudged while you were being divinely recalibrated. They can imitate your surface, but they can't replicate your soul. And that reality keeps them disturbed, because it proves one brutal truth. They didn't pay the price, so they don't get the power. Number 5. You're forcing them to rethink who the real villains were. They painted you as the villain because it was easier than facing the truth. You were the scapegoat, the problem, the one who was always too much or too sensitive. They pinned the dysfunction on you so they could keep pretending everything else was normal. But now that your truth is coming to light and events are unfolding just like you said they would, the lies are starting to crack, and with them, the image of who the real problem always was. It's starting to sink in. You weren't the issue. You were the mirror. And now, the people they protected, defended, and blindly followed are the ones getting exposed. The ones they called honorable are being seen for who they really are, controlling, manipulative, sometimes even abusive. That's the part they're struggling with. It's not just about you being right, it's about who they were wrong about. The very people they told you to respect, stay loyal to, or forgive over and over are now the ones looking shady, guilty, and suspicious. It's making them feel sick. Because if you're not the villain, then that means they took sides against someone innocent. That means they defended evil while gaslighting the one telling the truth. It means they were used emotionally, spiritually, maybe even financially by the same system they helped uphold. And that level of realization is too heavy for some of them to carry. So they go quiet. They avoid you. Or they double down in denial. Because to fully accept what's happening would mean admitting they were pawns in a game much darker than they realized. You're not just exposing people. You're exposing an entire spiritual setup that fed off lies, control, and silence. And you were the threat not because you were messy, but because you were willing to see what they refused to look at. Now the masks are falling, and the real monsters? They were never you. And that revelation is burning a hole through their conscience. Number 6, you've broken the spell of their false authority. You shattered something they didn't even realize they were under, the illusion that certain people were untouchable. For years, maybe generations, they've been trained to see specific figures as the final voice, the spiritual authority, the moral compass. The pastor couldn't be questioned. The elder was always right. The matriarch ran the show behind the scenes, and no one dared challenge her. These were the gatekeepers of truth, and if you dared to say otherwise, you were labeled rebellious, ungrateful, or even demonic. But then you showed up with receipts, not just emotional ones, but prophetic ones. You started speaking on things that hadn't happened yet, and now those things are unfolding in front of their faces. That's not something they can ignore. It's not gossip. It's not slander. It's reality, cracking through a lie they were comfortable living in. And every time something else you said comes to pass, the fear they used to use against you starts turning on them. You didn't just speak truth, you exposed the spiritual manipulation that was being dressed up as holiness. The fear tactics, the control, the favoritism, the backdoor abuse masked as correction. You pulled the curtain back on all of it. And that's where the real panic comes from, because if you're right, then that means the people they trusted to lead them were actually leading them in circles, or worse, into spiritual bondage. Now they're shaken, because the people they once worshipped can't explain what's happening. They're fumbling, they're scrambling to maintain control. And the more they try to cover things up, the more obvious the cracks become. You've broken the spell. The fear that kept them in line is fading, and the reverence they had for false authority is being replaced by a very real fear of what truth looks like when it comes knocking. You didn't take their power by force. You took it by simply telling the truth and letting time prove you. That's why you scare them. Because you've made fear change sides, and now it's sitting in their lap. Number 7. You proved discernment isn't polite. It's prophetic. They wanted you to be quiet. They wanted you to blend in, stay polite, and conform to the status quo. To nod along and smile while they kept playing their games, pretending everything was fine. They thought your bluntness was rude, too sharp, too uncomfortable to digest. What they didn't realize, though, was that your discernment wasn't something you picked up from a book or a lesson. It wasn't a polished skill learned from years of obedience to a system. It was forged in the fires of survival. You didn't just sense what was wrong because you had a gift. You knew what was wrong because you lived it. Your discernment was born from watching systems fail, from seeing the destruction of trust, from surviving situations that would have crushed anyone else. You were forced to wake up to the truth about things that most people refuse to see. And now you carry that knowledge, raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic. Your bluntness, the one they mistook for rudeness, wasn't just a lack of tact. It was a spiritual urgency. You were calling out what others were too scared to face, shaking them awake from a spiritual slumber. They wanted you to be nice, to conform to their idea of what a good person should be. But your role was never about being good. It was about being real. And in that realness, You became the voice of truth that no one wanted to hear but desperately needed. Now, as your words start to hit with a force they can't ignore, they're realizing what they dismissed as too much was actually prophetic. Your clarity wasn't just intuition. It was the kind of insight that only comes from walking through hell and coming out on the other side stronger, more attuned and unshakable. And it's not just about being right. It's about being right on time when no one else had the courage to say it. Number 8. They see that you're not just surviving. You're ascending. They bet against you. They thought you'd be a casualty, a statistic, another person who couldn't handle the weight of everything that came your way. They figured you'd burn out under the pressure, fade into the background, or worse, fall into a trap that would make it easier for them to forget about you. But now here you are, standing taller than ever and doing more than just surviving. You're thriving, and it's not just that you're still here. You're growing in ways they never imagined possible. This is what terrifies them. Your life was supposed to be a cautionary tale, a reminder that people like you don't make it. They thought their control, their power, their influence could dictate your fate. But they were wrong. You didn't just survive the storm, you learned how to dance in it, how to turn its winds into your wings, and now, while they're watching in disbelief, your glow is getting brighter. Your presence is undeniable. The same ones who wanted you to fade are now watching you rise, higher, faster, with more clarity and purpose than they ever anticipated. What's scaring them isn't just that you're alive, it's that you're thriving without their permission. You've learned how to live outside their system, outside their expectations, and that's exactly what they couldn't control. They thought they held the keys to your success, that they could trap you in their narrative and keep you small and powerless. But instead of fading into their shadow, you've emerged into your own light. And not only are you doing well, but your influence is expanding, without any of their influence. The way you're moving is a constant reminder to them that they never had the power they thought they did. You've broken free, and now they're forced to watch from the sidelines as you ascend in ways they never saw coming. It's not just your survival anymore, it's your triumph, and that's a reality they can't deny. Number 9. Your life is becoming a walking indictment. Every step you take toward success, every piece of your life that thrives despite the odds, serves as a silent but undeniable reminder to them. You're not just living, you're becoming living proof of everything they tried to bury, dismiss, or distort. Each time they witness you prosper, it's like they're being confronted by their own actions, their own complicity in the suffering you endured. Whether they were the ones who caused the harm or just stood by and let it happen, your rise is forcing them to face the consequences of what they allowed. They thought you would break. They thought they could silence you with their judgment, their abandonment, or their abuse. But what they didn't understand is that you were never meant to crumble under pressure. You were meant to be a witness to the power of truth that can't be erased, no matter how much they tried to bury it. Your healing isn't just personal, it's a testimony. It's a walking indictment of everything they thought they could get away with. And you're not even trying to get even with anyone. You're not holding grudges or making people pay for what they did to you. Your mere existence is doing all the work for you. Your peace, your success, your happiness is the biggest smack in the face they could ever get. What's truly terrifying for them is that you're not fighting back in the ways they expected. You're not holding on to bitterness or plotting some grand revenge. You've transcended that. Your growth, your peace, and your prosperity are speaking volumes without you ever having to say a word. It's louder than any revenge could ever be. Your life is shouting, look at the truth they tried to suppress. Look at how powerful a healed soul can be, even when they tried to break it. And that's the part they can't stand to face. Their actions created a force they never anticipated. Your ascension. Number 10. You spoke truth before it was trendy. You were ahead of the curve, speaking truths that others are only now starting to acknowledge, and only because it's become fashionable or acceptable to do so. When you first said it, they mocked you. They called you crazy, radical, or even divisive for saying what was always true. But now, those same people who ridiculed you are suddenly championing the very things they once dismissed. They're co-opting the truths you put on the table long before it was trendy, acting like they're the ones who always knew. And here's the kicker. They think you don't see it. You saw the hypocrisy the moment they started parroting the same ideas that used to get you silenced. You watched them reframe the narrative, twisting it to fit into their own sanitized version of woke or progressive, hoping no one would notice that they were once on the opposite side of what they're now pretending to support. And that's where their fear comes in, because they know you remember. You were the one who spoke up first. You took the hits, the ridicule, the isolation, all while staying true to the truth that was clearly visible to anyone willing to look beyond the surface. They're scrambling now because they're not just trying to align with a new narrative. They're trying to erase the fact that they ever stood against what you've been saying all along. And as they rewrite history in their favor, the only thing they're succeeding at is revealing how afraid they are of being exposed. They know you see through the act. You know exactly why they've suddenly become allies of what they once fought so hard to undermine. And that awareness, that's their real nightmare. Because they can't erase the fact that you spoke the truth before it was trendy, and you always will. Number 11. Their institutions can't handle your unfiltered calling. You don't fit the mold, and that's what terrifies them. They've spent years, decades even, building systems and roles that are tightly controlled. Pastors preach their sermons in a way that aligns with the agenda. Therapists follow a curriculum that keeps people pacified. And influencers? Well, they're all about marketable content and staying within the lines. But you're not here to play by their rules. You didn't sign up for their scripts, their institutions, or their sanitized structures. You're not willing to be boxed into any role they can manage or define, and that's exactly what makes you dangerous. They can't church you because you're not here to blend in and follow the standard rituals that keep people compliant. They can't cancel you because to cancel you, they'd have to confront the raw truth you carry, and that's something they can't afford to face. They can't brand you because you're too wild, too authentic, too real. You're the kind of force they can't package, market, or turn into a commodity. You are everything their controlled environment can't predict or control, and that's shaking them to their core. You're a loose cannon in a world that thrives on keeping everything in a neat, manageable little box. You're unpredictable, unapologetic, and untouchable. You're living proof that divine purpose can't be contained or domesticated, no matter how much they try to slap a title on you or force you into a box. And that makes you a threat in their safe, scripted world where everything is supposed to stay neat, controlled, and easy to navigate. But here's the truth they're trying to avoid. The moment they try to silence or contain you, you'll only get louder, stronger, and more powerful. You're not a product to be marketed. You're a force to be reckoned with, and no matter how hard they try to make you fit into their tidy little narratives, you'll keep breaking free. Because you're not here to play their game. You're here to change it entirely. Number 12. You're a mirror. They can't look away from anymore. Every time something you predicted comes to pass, every truth you speak that holds weight, it's like another crack in the illusion they've been hiding behind. You're not just revealing what they've been trying to ignore. You're reflecting their denial right back at them. Each word, each action of yours is a mirror, showing them not only who you are, but who they've refused to face themselves. And that's the real issue. They can't look away, but they also can't handle what they see. You're a mirror with memory, an unflinching reflection that doesn't let them forget what they've tried to erase. They tried to dismiss you, discredit you, and even convince themselves that you were wrong. But as you keep rising, as the truths you spoke continue to unfold, they're confronted with their own blindness, their own refusal to accept what was in front of them all along. They thought they could avoid it, that they could rewrite history and shape the narrative to fit their comfort zone. But every time they see you, they're reminded that the truth doesn't bend to their will, it stands firm. And you are that truth made flesh. It's not just about you anymore, it's about them. When they finally can't look away, when they finally have to face who you've become and the truths you've been preaching, they realize they've been running from something much deeper than you. They've been running from themselves, the person they tried to deny, the uncomfortable truths they ignored, the parts of themselves they've buried. They're all staring them in the face through you. You're forcing them to look at what they'd rather leave in the dark. You're making them confront the parts of their own hearts and minds they've kept hidden. And that, more than anything, is what they're terrified of. Because the moment they face themselves in your reflection, they'll have no choice but to reckon with the reality they've spent so long avoiding. Number 13. You made pain look like power, and that broke their logic. They thought pain was a weakness, a mark of failure, something to be avoided at all costs. For them, the goal was always to avoid the hard truths, the struggles, the suffering, because in their minds, anything difficult was a sign of something going wrong. But you didn't just survive the pain. You transformed it. You came out of the exile not broken, not defeated, but glowing with a power they could never understand. And that terrifies them because it shatters everything they believed about how the world works. When you rise from pain with strength, when your scars turn into battle armor, you force them to face a reality they refuse to accept. That pain isn't something to run from. It's a forge. It's where real power is shaped. They built their entire existence around staying comfortable, around avoiding the hard things, and above all, avoiding any situation that could threaten their precious sense of safety. And yet, here you are, thriving in the aftermath of suffering, radiating power from the very thing they feared would destroy them. Your transformation isn't just physical, it's spiritual, mental, and emotional. You've become the living embodiment of how pain can be a catalyst for greatness, for rebirth. And that's the silent threat you pose to their world. If you can turn pain into power, then everything they've based their fragile, comfort-based lives on is an illusion. It's a lie they've been feeding themselves. Your very existence challenges the foundation of everything they hold dear. The fact that you've learned to wield pain as a tool of empowerment isn't something they can comprehend. It doesn't fit into their logic, their belief system, or their understanding of how the world works. And that's why they're so afraid of you, because you're living proof that pain isn't the end. It's the beginning of something far greater than they can even imagine. Number 14. They see that God didn't need their permission to choose you. What truly terrifies them is that you were chosen without their approval, without their validation, and certainly without their blessing. They built their entire existence around the idea that power, influence, and divine favor are things that must be earned in their way, through credentials, recognition, and the approval of the right people. But you didn't need any of that. Heaven didn't ask for their permission before placing a calling on your life. The divine favor poured down on you when they looked the other way, when they thought you weren't worthy, when they wrote you off as insignificant. That's what shakes them to the core. Your elevation wasn't contingent on anything they control. They spent so long believing they were gatekeepers to success, to power, to favor. They thought they had the monopoly on who gets to rise and who stays down. But your story is the ultimate disruption to their self-made system. You didn't need a platform built by them. You didn't need a crowd chanting your name. The moment heaven chose you, the entire game changed. And they can't handle it, because in their world, everything works according to their rules. You've become living proof that divine authority doesn't answer to human constructs. God doesn't need their platform to bless you. Heaven didn't wait for their approval to pour out destiny on your life. You were chosen long before they ever decided you were worth looking at. This divine reversal is the ultimate affront to their carefully constructed sense of power. It's a reminder that no matter how much they've built, how much they've manipulated, or how much they've controlled, they can't dictate who gets called and who doesn't. Your life is a living testament to the fact that God doesn't need their stamp of approval. And that reality, more than anything, is what threatens their authority. Because deep down, they know the truth. No matter how much power they hold, the higher calling on your life will always supersede their control. In the end, your existence is a bold declaration that no one can ignore. Every truth you've spoken, every battle you've fought, and every moment you've risen from adversity is a direct challenge to the systems and beliefs they've spent lifetimes building. You are the walking proof that destiny isn't confined to the structures they've put in place, nor is it dependent on their approval. Your life is a divine reminder that no amount of control, no amount of rejection, no amount of manipulation can silence or shape the truth that was meant for you. They thought they could hold you down, dismiss your power, and control your story. But with every step you take toward your greatness, you shatter their illusions and force them to confront the reality they tried so desperately to avoid. You've made pain into power, transformed rejection into purpose, and turned what they saw as weaknesses into your greatest strengths. You've risen from the ashes of their expectations to create a narrative that is entirely your own, and the world can't help but watch in awe. What scares them most isn't your success, but the undeniable truth that you were always destined for more. And now, as your light grows brighter and your influence reaches further, they have no choice but to face the very thing they feared. You were chosen before they ever even knew your name, and nothing at all, could stop you from fulfilling your purpose. Your rise isn't just a personal victory. It's a statement to everyone who ever doubted you, mocked you, or tried to keep you hidden. The world was never meant to define you, because your destiny was written far beyond their control. Keep rising, keep shining, and remember, this is only the beginning. If this message resonated with you, and you're ready to keep embracing your power, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join this community of truth seekers. Make sure to like, comment, and share this with anyone who needs to hear it. Let's spread the truth together, because the world is waiting for us to rise. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story and how you're breaking free from the chains that tried to hold you back. Keep shining, keep thriving, and remember, your journey is just getting started. Let's go.